Good evening, everyone, and welcome once again to our Bhagavad-gita Satsang. I'm Hari-kirtana, and it's a pleasure for me to be here with you, an honor to have you here with me. Thank you very much for coming. It's nice to see you here. Kamala Radha in the house. Thank you so much for being here. Please confirm that my voice can be heard by raising your hand with your little raise your hand gizmo. Thank you very much for letting me know that you can hear me. And now that we've done that, let's take care of our usual housekeeping business. So for those of you who are new, and thank you very much for being here, you can adjust your audio settings and your viewing options up in the upper right-hand corner. You need not worry about your microphone or video camera because while you can see and hear me, I cannot see or hear you. But if you would like to make yourself heard, you can always ask a question by typing something into the Q&A box. A comment is welcome as well. And I will try and keep a lookout in the chat as well, but the best place to put a comment or a question is in the Q&A box. And with that, our last class, last week, we began chapter 11, the Yoga of Divine Revelation or Theophany, and we covered verses 1 through 4. Arjuna still would like to hear the details. And as we'll discuss this evening, what he's actually asking for is the inverse of what we received in chapter 10. I'll explain that in just a few moments. We spoke about the reasons why Arjuna is asking for this particular revelation, not so much for himself, but for others. And we will go a little deeper into this idea this evening. And we spoke a little bit about the nature of the unlimited infinite and how the unlimited infinite, which is beyond our conception, can make some sense of, or some comprehension of the unlimited infinite comprehensible to us. So tonight, we continue with chapter 11. We'll speak about how one can see whatever one wishes to see in the universal form of the Supreme Person, which is to say, the material world. We'll talk about the limits of material vision and discuss the light of 1,000 suns. We're going to cover verses 5 through 12 in chapter 11 this evening. But first, we will chant call and response style our invocation mantra. So for those of you who are new, the dot over the M is a diacritic mark indicating that we close the back of our tongue to the back of the roof of our mouth at the same time we bring our lips together in front. You will find this dot sometimes above or sometimes below vowels like M's and N's and T's and such. The bar across the top of a vowel indicates a long open version of that vowel, in this case, the vowel A or ah, as opposed to a short or truncated version of that same vowel, in this case, I chant, you chant back. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. The translation: I offer my respects to the Supreme Person, the Son of Vasudeva, who is the all-pervading transcendence. So, just recapping from last week. Theophany, the revelation of God to a human being in a visible form, and not just a visible form, but an unambiguous manifestation of God to a human being where there's just no question as to who is revealing themselves. Who is it that is being seen? It's an appearance of God that reflects who God is. What is the nature or character of God? This character or nature is reflected in this appearance, in the form that is revealed. The Sanskrit word that we have been working with primarily in this regard is vibhuti, meaning opulences or powers or majesty. Another English word that we can apply to this idea is transfiguration. We hear this in Christian theology, the transfiguration of Christ, that is to say, his revelation of his divinity on the mountaintop with his disciples. Transfiguration means a dramatic change in appearance, especially one that reveals great beauty, radiance, spirituality, magnificence, that sort of thing. So here's what's happening right now in the Bhagavad-gita. Krishna is speaking with Arjuna on the chariot in the middle of the battlefield between the two armies. Just looks like two guys talking. And it's still going to look like two guys talking to all the soldiers on the battlefield. But to Arjuna, things are about to change very, very dramatically. So here's where we left off. Arjuna speaking to Krishna, O Supreme Lord, O Ultimate Person, as you have thus described yourself, I wish to see your form of divine majesty. If you think that it is possible for me to see in this way, O Supreme Lord, Master of mystic power, then reveal this imperishable form to me. For many, this is the climactic moment of the Bhagavad-gita, the big reveal where the understanding is Krishna now tells Arjuna who he really is, or more to the point, he shows Arjuna who he really is. And I and other teachers, at least in my lineage, think this is a slight misreading. Actually, Arjuna has seen Krishna as he really is this whole time, standing there in his human-like form that is nonetheless completely transcendental, which is to say it is not made of matter, different from our human-like forms, in that we're not just human-like, we're human. And our forms are made of matter, and they're perishable, whereas Krishna's form is very different. So here Arjuna has been seeing Krishna all this time. He is asking Krishna to show what's going on behind the scenes, which is to say, Arjuna is asking Krishna to show him, Arjuna, how Krishna connects himself to the world. Now, in the previous chapter, in the 10th chapter, what we heard from Krishna is the response to Arjuna's request to understand how we can meditate on the Supreme Person while we are here in the material world. What aspects of the material world Can we see the Supreme Person in? Can we connect to the Supreme Person through? And here, what Arjuna is asking Krishna to do is now reveal not how can we connect to divinity through the world, but how does divinity connect to the world? In essence, Arjuna is asking the supreme magician to take us behind the scenes and show him how he does it. How does this magic of being all-pervading, being omniscient, being all-powerful, how does it happen? So that will bring us to this week's verses. I will read the translations all the way through, verses 5 through 12, and then we will go back and look at them in detail. So here we go. Beginning with verse number 5, the Blessed Lord said, O son of Pritha, behold my hundreds and thousands of divine forms, appearing in a wonderful multitude of categories, colors, and shapes. Verse 6. Behold the Adityas, Vasus, Rudras, the Ashvini Kumaras, the Maruts, and all the other demigods. O best of the Bharatas, behold many wonders that no one has seen before. Verse 7. Now behold the entire universe, with all that moves and all that is still, all in one place. O conqueror of sleep, whatever else you may wish to see is here within my body. Verse 8. But you cannot see this form with just your own eyes. Therefore, I give you divine eyes. Behold my mystic power. X9. Sanjaya said, having thus spoken, O king, the greatest of all mystic yogis, Hari, Krishna, revealed his form of supreme power and divine majesty to the son of Pandu, Arjuna. Verses 10 and 11. Arjuna saw innumerable mouths, innumerable eyes, and innumerable wondrous visions, a form decorated with countless divine ornaments and carrying countless divine upraised weapons, wearing divine garlands and garments, smeared with divine scents and ointments, consisting of endless divine wonders and facing in all directions. Verse 12. If 1,000 suns were to appear all at once in the sky, their radiance might resemble the brilliance of the Supreme Self. That takes us through our verses. So let's go through these now in detail. Back to verse number 5. And even if before we get to any of the details, if you have any questions about what you have heard thus far, then please, by all means, go ahead and type your question or comment into the Q&A box. So back to verse 5. The Blessed Lord said, in response to Arjuna's request, O son of Prita, behold my hundreds and thousands of divine forms appearing in a wonderful multitude of categories, colors, and shapes. Sometimes we hear that this is evidence that everything is the Supreme Being, or that everything is God. Everyone is God. And for me, that doesn't actually make sense relative to this verse. And the reason is because Krishna is showing this wonderful multitude of forms, this innumerable number of forms. Well, only Krishna can do that. If I were as much God as Krishna, and if that's what this verse were to demonstrate, then I should also be able to do that. I should be able to give anyone divine eyes by which they could see how I am pervading this entire universe. But I don't have the experience of pervading this entire universe. I barely have the experience of pervading my universe. And I certainly cannot bestow any divine vision on anyone. And I am not capable of revealing anything that looks anything like this, what Krishna is describing here. So, logically, this is not really what this verse indicates, but rather it's indicating that Krishna is the supreme person. And he, and he alone, has hundreds and thousands of divine forms that are all him, or ways in which he is present by his energies, by his expansions, etc. In the next verse, Krishna continues, behold, the Adityas, Vasus, Rudras, and Ashvini Kumaras, the Marus, and all the other demigods, indicating that he's now running off a list of demigods. O best of the Bharats, behold many wonders that no one has seen before. This is also one of my favorite parts. So back in chapter 10, around verses 22, 23, etc., when Arjuna asks, how can I meditate on you? How can I remember you constantly? Krishna says, of Adityas, I am Vishnu. Of Vasus, I am fire, Agni. Of Rudras, I am Lord Shiva, etc. So he goes through this list. So now, rather than just saying, you can see me through these different celestial beings, he is actually manifesting those celestial beings out of his own personal form. So just for review, the Adityas are 12 celestial beings who preside over the sun. The Vasus are celestial beings of fire and light, Agni, fire, being the chief among them. Rudras, the Rudras are cosmic deities of cosmic dissolution and transformation. Lord Shiva, the deity in charge of destruction, is the chief among them. We didn't hear about the Ashvini Kumaras earlier. at least not that I recall. These are celestial twins of soothing dawn, according to Graham Schwag in his footnote on this verse in his edition of the Bhagavad-gita. The Ashvini Kumaras are physicians, celestial healers. And the Maruts are celestial beings that are associated with the elements of wind and lightning. So here Krishna is indicating that these celestial beings are born of him. They have their origin in him. They roll back up to him. Their power is derived from his power. And in addition to all of the celestial beings in charge of universal affairs, there are all manner of phenomena that have never been seen before, indicating that we have both, that we have past, present, and future, all present at once. Because for the Supreme Person existing in eternity, there really isn't any past, present, or future. That's kind of the mind-boggling part of being eternal. And therefore, from God's point of view, everything's happening at once. For us, that's inconceivable. And therefore more evidence that we are not in the position of the Supreme Person. Moving to verse 7. Now behold the entire universe with all that moves and all that is still, all in one place. O conqueror of sleep, whatever else you may wish to see is here within my body. So the body that Krishna is referring to is his universal form. That is the name generally given to this particular body. So here's the thing. Krishna reveals the universal form from within himself. It is not that the universal form gives rise to Krishna's form. It is not that the universal form is there producing Krishna. Rather, it is Krishna who is manifesting this form. Therefore, we get this phrase, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is to say, Krishna is the person from whom the qualities of God arise, from where the person from whom these qualities are manifest. The thing that struck me about this verse in particular is this idea that whatever else you may wish to see is here. Well, what do you want to see? Whatever it is, you'll find it here. One of Krishna's many names is Govinda, one who gives pleasure to the senses. And when we acquire material senses, then those senses go two ways. They can experience pleasure, they can also experience pain. You can get anything you want in the material world. Of course, there's no free lunch and a price to be paid for whatever it is you want to see. But the thing is, it's here. So wherever our minds take us, we can go. Whatever we develop an attraction for, a taste for, however the qualities of material nature combine to influence us to desire in a particular way, to pursue a particular path, to wish to acquire a particular person, go to a particular place, or engage with a particular thing. It's all here. There are innumerable living entities here, therefore innumerable desires, all of which can be fulfilled. Cross-referencing the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, we have this idea of a world that exists for a reason. I'm reading from Edwin Bryant's translation of the Yoga-sutras. This is Pada 2, or Chapter 2, Sutra 18. That which is knowable has the nature of illumination, activity, and inertia, or in other words, sattva, rajas, and tamas, the three qualities of material nature, also known as goodness, passion, and ignorance. It consists of the senses and the elements, and exists for the purpose of providing either liberation or experience to Purusha. So we have two reasons for the world being and for our being in the world. One is for our experience of the world. We can have whatever experience we desire. As Krishna has just told us, whatever we may wish to see is here within the form through which he connects to this material world. And as the material world is a transformation of Krishna's own spiritual energy, there is no limit to the permutations of that transformation. It can appear in any way. So here, Patanjali describes the ingredients that make up the experience and the purpose that the combination of these three qualities of material nature serve. Either experience, or our other option is liberation. Then goes on to describe the gunas, the three qualities of material nature at some length. Then, coming to Sutra 21, he concludes this thought on the nature of why the material world is here. The essential nature of that which is seen is exclusively for the sake of the seer. The only reason the material world exists is to facilitate our experience of it, or to facilitate our liberation from it. And the commentators on this particular sutra speak about how even for one who is liberated, while the world disappears from the view of one who is liberated, having no further connection to the material world still exists because all these other Purushas, living beings, have this shared experience of the material world to which they are still attached. But it doesn't exist just for its own sake. And this is a very not modern way of thinking about the world. Remember, in our modern paradigm, the world comes into existence by pure chance for no particular reason. And one might project that the world has its own reason for being. But yoga philosophy tells us that this is not the case. And commentators give examples as to how we can understand this. So, for example, a bed does not exist for its own sake. It exists for the sake of the person who lies down on the bed, presumably goes to sleep. A house does not exist just for its own sake. It exists for the sake of the person or persons living in the house. So the material world is like a house. It's a big house, but still like a house. And it exists for the occupants, not for itself. Hence, as Krishna connects to the world, he manifests unlimited varieties of stuff in order to fulfill the desires of the unlimited number of living beings who are experiencing the pursuit of the fulfillment of their desires here in the material world. So, whatever you may wish to see is here. But when you see it, the trick is to remember whose energy it is, to see that whatever is here in the material world, it's contingent on the presence of the Supreme Being within the world through this, what is called the Virat Rupa, or the universal form. Anyway, please let me know if you have any questions or comments on that. Meanwhile, let's go to our next verse, which is the first of two verses we are going to chant this evening. So this is verse number 8, the translation. But you cannot see me in this form with just your own eyes. Therefore, I give you divine eyes. Behold my mystic power. This is the big reveal. So I'll explain a little bit about how we chant the transliterated Sanskrit. The bar across the vowel and the dot over the consonant, I have already explained. The accent mark over an S indicates a deep SH sound pronounced from the back of one's mouth, kind of low-pitched pink noise, as opposed to a regular sh sound. Dot under the S is the sh sound, regular SH sound. The T with a dot under it means that you're bringing the tip of your tongue back into the center of the roof of your mouth rather than behind your teeth. A C in transliterated Sanskrit is always a CH sound, cha. And a dot under an H at the end of a word, at the end of a line, indicates that you echo a short version of the vowel that precedes the H back. In this case, it'll be a U, as you can see in the third line. And that takes care of the diacritical marks that act as pronunciation cues for our transliterated Sanskrit. So here we go. I chant one line, you chant the line back. We do it one line at a time. Na tu mam shakyase drashtum anenaiva svachakshusha divyam dadhami te chakshuhu pashyame yogam aishwaram. I would like to bring your attention specifically to the phrase at the very end, yogam aishwaram. So aishvarya is what is the Sanskrit word we've been speaking of, meaning opulences, extraordinary, majestic powers, and yogam, meaning yoga, union. So here, Krishna is speaking of pashyame yogam aishwaram, behold my mystic power. So it is the power of mystic yoga. Krishna's mystic yoga is unlike anybody else's mystic yoga. A yogi may practice for many years and gain some mystic powers as a result. Krishna never has to practice. He automatically has all mystic power, and any mystic power that a yogi derives from their practice or gains from their practice is ultimately accessing some of Krishna's power by Krishna's grace. But here, Krishna is revealing the mystic power by which he becomes the universe. That's pretty extraordinary mystic power. So now here's the thing about this. As I said earlier, Arjuna already sees Krishna in his original form, his human-like form, from which this mind-blowing universal form will emanate, will be revealed. And there are two reasons why one may not be able to see this form with just regular eyes. Well, I should say there are two kinds of eyes that we could have, neither of which is going to see this form. The first is regular eyes, eyes that are made of matter, that are designed to see matter, and that reside in the sockets of bodies populated by people who are not getting any particular special favor that would allow their vision to be transformed. Just like if you go to the movies, and the movie's in 3D, you have to have the 3D glasses in order to actually see the movie in 3D. Otherwise, it just looks like a flat movie. So similarly, with regular eyes, unless you get the special 3D glasses from Krishna, you're not going to be able to see the universal form. That's not exactly the case for Arjuna, though. Arjuna is Krishna's dearmost friend and devotee. We have already established that Arjuna's qualification from hearing the Bhagavad-gita from Krishna is that he is not envious of Krishna, that he is friends with Krishna, that there's a relationship there. And it's a relationship of love. Arjuna has a relationship with love with Krishna, of love with Krishna, and Krishna, out of love for Arjuna, has agreed to become his chariot driver. Even though Krishna is the supreme person, or at the very least a prince in his own right, still he has taken this very lowly position of chauffeur out of love. So there's an established relationship. And eyes smeared with the salve of love cannot see the majesty of the beloved. The majesty part is the part that inspires worship. The beauty part is the part that inspires love. So the form that Arjuna is seeing on the battlefield is the beautiful form of Krishna. Similarly, the Srimad Bhagavatam, biography of the Supreme Person, also describes how in Krishna's youth, his childhood friends did not see that they were playing with the Supreme Person. They saw their friend. Just as a child sitting on the lap of their father might not recognize their position in society. They might be a very important person. They might be the CEO of a big company. They might occupy a political post or in some way be in an elevated social position or what have you. But the child is only going to think, this is my parent, this is my father, this is my mother, crawl on their lap, act like a child in relationship to a parent, a totally different relationship. So I'll read just a short passage narrated by Shukadeva Goswami in the Srimad Bhagavatam about Krishna's friends. He writes, "Here is the Supreme Person, Krishna, who is considered the impersonal Brahman by great sages, the Supreme Personality of Godhead by devotees, and a product of material nature by ordinary men. Now, these boys, who have performed many, many pious activities in their past lives, are playing with that Supreme Personality of Godhead." And this is actually the point, to become Krishna's devotee, not to worship Krishna or to obey Krishna's commandments. You go through that on the way to this kind of pure love. But that's not the goal. The goal, as far as the Bhagavad-gita is concerned, is not to merge into the impersonal Brahman, the undifferentiated oneness of being, or to gain mystic powers, or to be a good person, or to worship God. The ultimate objective, Krishna described back in the end of the 9th chapter, where he says, "Engage your mind always in thinking of me, become my devotee. Offer your respects to me and worship me. Being completely absorbed in me, surely you will come to me." So, always thinking of me, engaging in devotional service, offering respects and worship are all means to an end. That is to say, the practice of devotion leads to the experience of devotion. And coming to Krishna in this relationship is the actual goal. So now, what purpose is being served by Krishna revealing this universal form to Arjuna if Arjuna is already Krishna's devotee? He's already there. What's the point here? Well, the point is that Arjuna himself is not really so concerned about seeing the universal form for himself. Rather, Arjuna is asking Krishna to substantiate his statements with a revelation, so that it's not just a matter of a theoretical idea or a philosophical proposition that Krishna is the Supreme Being, but rather Arjuna wants to be able to say that Krishna has actually presented himself as the Supreme Being, so that others will be benefited. Remember, back in the 4th chapter, in the beginning of the 4th chapter, Krishna establishes that he has taught this science of yoga before, and that visionary kings received the supreme science through a chain of disciplic succession. This succession being broken, Krishna now appears in order to reestablish this parampara, this one after the other, this science of yoga being transmitted through a lineage. And he's speaking the same science to Arjuna. Arjuna is now given the responsibility of anchoring this new lineage. And his qualification is because he is a devotee as well as a friend. And therefore, Krishna is revealing this science to him. And this science has a secret. And in the 9th verse of that 4th chapter, Krishna begins to reveal himself by saying, "O Arjuna, one who knows the truth about the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not upon leaving their body, take birth again in this material world. They come to me instead. So now Arjuna has the responsibility of anchoring a line of disciplic succession through which others may know the truth about Krishna and gain this ultimate boon of never having to take birth in the material world again, but instead coming to Krishna in a relationship of love. Therefore, Arjuna has this responsibility to be able to say, Krishna has revealed himself to me, not just in theory, but in experience, in practice, that he is indeed the supreme person, and his appearance here in the world is not something mundane. Which brings us to verse number 9, heading into the home stretch. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to pop them into the Q&A. Verse number 9, Sanjaya said, having thus spoken, O king, the greatest of all mystic yogis, Hari-kirtana, revealed his form of supreme power and divine majesty to the son of Pandu, Arjuna. Now, here's a cool thing. Everyone on the battlefield just sees two guys on a chariot talking. Arjuna, now the curtain goes up and the amazing light show of God appears. And Sanjaya can see what Arjuna sees, and therefore is able to describe what Arjuna is seeing to Dhritarashtra, the blind king, to whom he is relating the events that he can see by his own mystic vision far away on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. And he begins, Sanjaya begins to describe what Arjuna sees in verses 10 and 11. Arjuna saw innumerable mouths, innumerable eyes, and innumerable wondrous visions. A form decorated with countless divine ornaments and carrying countless divine upraised weapons, wearing divine garlands and garments, smeared with divine scents and ointments, consisting of endless divine wonders and facing in all directions. That's got to be really, really mind-blowing. Which brings us to our last verse. But first, what does this look like? How can we get a sense of what Arjuna is seeing? Well, you've been seeing it since I started doing this online class, because this universal form is what appears to you when I begin and usually when I conclude these classes. So this is a illustration, painting actually, that gives one some sense of what it is that has just appeared for our Arjuna to see through his divine 3D glasses. So we're going to be hanging with this form for several more verses. And we will chant this last verse of this section. Once again, let me just see if we have any new bits of information for chanting the transliterated Sanskrit. We sound each letter that appears. So an H after a B means you put some air after the B. Also, if two T's are together, You slam on the brakes at the first T and then continue with the second T. You'll see that in the last word of the second line. The dot under the H does not produce any echo unless it is at the end of a line. A dot under an R means that one's tongue is rolled back toward the center of the roof of your mouth, as opposed to bringing your top teeth past your lower lip. So rather than it's ra or and that ought to do it. I chant each line, you chant each line back. Here we go. Divvi Surya Sahasrasya Bhaved Yuga Pad Uttita Yadi Bhasadrishi Sasyad Bhasastasya Mahatmanaha. Once again, I'd like to draw your attention to the last word of this verse, Mahatmanaha. So Maha means great, Atma means self. So this word would mean great soul or great self of one's great self. So here, the translation: if 1,000 suns were to appear all at once in the sky, their radiance might resemble the brilliance of that supreme self. So Sanjaya has this mystic vision by the grace of his guru, Vyasadeva, and therefore he could see whatever happened, and then knowing that Sanjaya is watching and relating these events to Dhritarashtra, because after all, Krishna is omniscient, in fact, the very seed of omniscience. So Krishna also extends this divine vision to Sanjaya. And now Sanjaya compares the situation as far as it can be understood to some imaginable phenomenon. Because what the light show of God is in the category of ineffable. You really can't do justice with language to something that grand, that beautiful, that awe-inspiring, that amazing. We even have that experience in the material world. You go to the Grand Canyon. It's really grand. And it just blows your mind when you actually see it, as opposed to when you see photos or hear about it. Victoria Falls, or even Niagara Falls. I haven't seen Victoria Falls, but I've seen Niagara Falls. The power of all that water, it's pretty intense, and you just don't get it from a photograph. It's impressive in a photograph, but to actually see it, even man-made stuff. It took me, I think, 5 trips to India before I finally went to see the Taj Mahal. And it's beautiful. Photographs don't do it justice. It really is mind-blowingly beautiful. And to see it in person, you really appreciate just how spectacular it is beyond all the photos that we've seen. So similarly, this form by which the Supreme Person connects to the material world is just totally, totally mind-blowing. And therefore Sanjaya gives some approximation of just how brilliant the glow, the effulgence of this divine form is by this idea of 1,000 suns rising into the sky at once. How bright would that be? That's how bright we're talking. And I'm almost done talking. So if you have any questions or comments about what I have been discussing relating to you about this chapter, I would be very, very happy to hear your questions. About tonight's class, the Yoga of Divine Revelation or Theophany, seeing whatever we wish to see in the form of the Supreme Person that enters into this universe. We cannot see such a form with our regular material vision because we are so limited to the field of matter, and therefore we need special vision in order to see such a thing. And we've heard about how this universal form is compared to a light of the radiance of 1,000 suns. We covered verses 5 through 12. Andrew, what is my favorite translation of the Bhagavad-gita? I have several favorite translations. Let's stop this for just a moment. The translations that I've used this evening are my own, and I derive those translations from about 8 different Bhagavad-gitas that I combine together, and I like them all for different reasons. I like Graham Schweig's Bhagavad-gita because there is a wonderful combination of accuracy and poetry in the translation. So it's beautiful. I like H.D. Goswami's literal translation because it is very compact, it's very terse. It is just what's there in the Sanskrit, no frills. So you get a very raw experience of the Gita in that way. I like A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is because it delivers what I have come to believe is the ultimate siddhanta or philosophical conclusion in practically every verse. I like Joshua Green's Gita Wisdom as an introductory translation. If one has never read the Bhagavad Gita before, then that's a great way to start. It's very simple, very accessible, very transparent in its translation, and there are footnotes that really give a nice context to the Bhagavad Gita for someone who is new to the Gita. And anyway, so those are my favorite translations. Swami Tripurari has a very nice translation, Bhagavad Gita. It's philosophy and feeling, or feeling and philosophy. I forgot what he puts first, but that is also an edition of the Gita that I refer to quite a bit. So I hope that answers your question. My life is not simple. Therefore, it's hard for me to answer a simple question. However, Andrew's question shows up in the chat for all panelists as well. I would be very interested to know what your favorite, you're very welcome, Andrew. I would be very interested to know your favorite translations of Bhagavad Gita. You can share them here or go to our Facebook group and share them there. And if you're not yet a member of the Facebook group, go to Bhagavad-gita Satsang. Just look for it on Facebook, or send me an email, which you'll be able to do in just a moment, and I'll hook you up with it. Jill, you're very welcome. It is my great pleasure to be able to share my understanding of Bhagavad Gita with all of you. Let's come back to the screen as we finish up. If you have any questions after the fact, please send them to me, Hari at Hari-kirtana.com, Hari-kirtana.com. And if you are not able to find our Bhagavad-gita Satsang Facebook group, look for it, Bhagavad-gita Satsang. And if you don't come up with it, send me an email and I'll send you the link. Please participate there with further discussion, including your favorite translations of the Bhagavad-gita. Next week, we will continue with the Yoga of Divine Revelation, seeing everything everywhere all in one place. Far out, man. Astonishment as a rasa, or a mood of relationship, a taste of a relationship. Rasa is a very difficult word to translate into English, but we're going to try. And we're going to start with astonishment as a way to get into the whole idea of moods or feelings or tastes of transcendental relationships that one can have with Krishna. And we will begin Arjuna's prayers, in which he will provide us with a narrative of what he is seeing. And therefore, we will also be able to sort of see through his eyes. All right. I thank you all very, very much for being here with me this evening. I am always very grateful for the opportunity to discuss the Bhagavad-gita with you. I'm very honored that you choose to spend your time with me. I look forward to seeing you all again next week. Until then, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week and weekend, and I look forward to seeing you all next time. And next time, I'm going to try to smile more. Have a nice night.